What's up, everybody? Welcome to the VSM Real Estate Podcast, getting you close to massively successful people in the Twin Cities real estate market. I'm your host, Andrei Anderson. Today, joined by another Andrei Bortnov.
Hello, how you doing, Andrei?
Not too bad, Andrei. How about you?
I'm doing well. I think that's the first thing we should address is maybe we should be Anderson and Bortnov or something.
Right, exactly. Or I could be Dre, you could be Andrei, or I don't know. We could do whatever. Yeah, Anderson, Bortnov. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah,
I like that.
Sure.
I like that.
Yeah, excellent.
Makes it less confusing for a few people. We do sound like a law firm, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Anderson and Bortnov, attorneys at law. Please don't sue us. We're not attorneys. We're not giving any legal advice, anything like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good disclaimer.
Exactly. So I know that you kind of joined the VSM team, similar how I joined. Well, it was VSM Commercial, and then
different arm.
Now you're in Obsidian Group and whatnot. But you kind of joined similar path through like Daniel. Daniel Krakowski and whatnot. So maybe you can kind of introduce yourself to everybody here, watching it on the podcast, kind of give your background, how you got into real estate, what you're doing now, all that kind of stuff. Take it however you want. Yeah,
for sure. I'll give kind of a overarching view on everything, and then we can kind of dig deeper into whatever topics we need to. I actually came, as you know, from an engineering background. That's kind of what I did prior to what I'm doing right now, which is commercial real estate. I focused a lot on processes and systems. In my role there, I actually was a manager at the same time. But I was always intrigued by investment properties and capital and its distribution. So I wanted to focus and kind of more better round myself on the business and the sales and marketing. So I ended up interviewing and talking with quite a bit of people that were in the real estate industry, and decided to join VSM. It was VSM Commercial at that time. Yep. That was kind of maybe a bridge more than anything to what now is Obsidian Group. But what I ended up focusing on, since I didn't have a specific, a detailed outline coming from a vastly different field, I did kind of everything. So between residential and commercial, I did buying, residential selling, working with investors, and then on the commercial end of it, buying, selling investment properties, owner-occupant properties, did tenant rep, helping businesses find space, and landlord rep. So not a strategy I'd recommend. I just, when I started, I wasn't specifically certain what I wanted to do. I knew at that time I did not want to do residential full-time. I just wanted to know a little bit about the mechanics so I can actually talk about it with majority of us live in some sort of
dwelling.
Dwelling. Whether it's a single-family home or a condo, let's say on a buy
or a cave,
or a cave. That real estate is I don't know how pricey that is, but I ended up doing a little bit of that, maybe like a dozen transactions, and only one of them was with a buyer that was planning on living in the property. Everything else was with investors.
Really? Okay.
I really did stick to kind of my goals and plans of understanding the concept of investing on the residential market. But that was short-lived. It's just, again, a few transactions that I got under my belt. Then switched to commercial full-time. So I only do commercial. I've only been doing commercial
for a while now.
For a while, yep, exactly.
For sure, yeah. So why wouldn't you recommend, kind of, shotgunning and then trying everything out?
Okay, so that's a great question. There are people out there in the market that are successful using that strategy. I feel like the main issue with that is you end up focusing on so many different things. You're actually not good, at least initially, not good at anything at all. And for you to be competent, let's say you're talking about lease rates or prices or cap rates, any of that, you want to stick to a certain field. And in commercial real estate, you're able to, at least in the Twin Cities market, you're able to hone in on a certain asset, which if it's in a smaller market, it's harder to do. You become more of a generalist. But if you end up focusing on all these items, let's say residential, commercial, you're trying to help landlords or businesses or investors, you're going to end up, I believe, losing business, first of all, because you're not going to get enough traction, and at the same time, you're not going to provide the right value. And third, it's just going to take so long for you to be competent. It's probably not the best path moving forward. So from my experience, it was the right move for me because I wasn't necessarily aware of how I wanted to structure what I was doing. Right now, I'm 50 times more focused than I was when I started. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that a lot of people they tend to get lost in the weeds, especially if you're kind of getting into business, especially as like an entrepreneur. You kind of see this shiny object, and you just kind of get lost, and you're like, oh, this is, because a lot of times we're passionately curious, you know, we kind of want to understand, especially as an engineer that like does systems and whatnot, you want to understand the components and how they work together, and like just understanding something, and you're like, yeah, that's awesome, because there's such, you know, reward from it, you know, and fulfillment from it. So I definitely can see that. But would you say though that kind of going through that a little bit at first, it still kind of allows you to play with different, you know, concepts, or see what you kind of liked and what you gravitated towards, or did you feel like you already kind of knew what you would have gravitated towards even kind of before that?
I knew that I didn't want to do residential because I was always intrigued with commercial and how the bigger properties and bigger projects came together. So I knew eventually I was going to go into it. It was really, the residential side was really short-lived. I got what I needed out of it and then transitioned. Overall, I think going back to a point that you mentioned earlier here, if you're looking at, say you're coming from a different field and you want to get into real estate, that's okay to try different things. I think you have to be with the right individuals, and you want to make sure that you position yourself with people that are interested in helping you, because it's usually not a preferred way of going about it. Again, coming from a vastly different field, it was appropriate for me, and the group of people that I was working with at that time they were very supportive. And again, I refocused pretty quickly. It took me about half a year or so.
Yeah, that's fast.
So I like that. But the other thing is, there's a different concept, and I don't know how often it gets talked about, is when you get started, it's a little bit intimidating because majority of us, we're not on a salary, so we only get, as brokers, get paid when something closes, when a project closes. So you continuously want to pick up everything, work on everything, and that spreads your focus. One thought to that: if you run across an opportunity that is of interest but not in your wheelhouse, you are more than welcome to refer that business. And it liberates almost all of your time. You could take the first, meeting maybe, right? You pass that business on to somebody and get a referral fee. So your time is opened up for you to focus on the right things. And then you still could potentially get, again, if the project closes, something in return monetarily for that down the line.
For sure.
So
that's a great system, definitely, because like then you know, you're still expanding your network, you're still providing value. I think that client will be able to get a lot more trust for you individually and anyone that you refer out to, because like, okay, well, they're obviously not just out there to get tons of money and like you know, try to work me however they can to, you know, if they're not familiar with this process or whatever. So I think you bring up a really good point. And I think that's a great way for when people are getting started, and then continue to go about that, because you know, you have to stay hyper focused in your business. Look at those, you know, time critical tasks and revenue producing tasks that are critical, right?
Absolutely.
It's maybe a little hard for people though. At the same time, I could see where if they're just starting, they actually maybe don't have that network, you know. Correct. So at the same time, you got to kind of be hustling and establish that network as much as possible.
Absolutely.
You know, that you feel comfortable, you know, referring to and whatnot. So,
absolutely. You do want to leverage your connections, and I think it's really critical for you to know and interview at the same time where you're planning your next move. So let's say you are trying to transition, it's good to talk with multiple people. I'm always available. I try to be on the internet as much as possible too, so it should be pretty easy to get a hold of, kind of as a resource. But use and talk with multiple people to see if it kind of drives with your goals. Because if you can put those two pieces together, I think you're going to be stepping in the right direction.
Right, for sure. So where are you? So what are you up to right now? What are you focusing on right now?
Sure. Yep. Perfect question. I love the segue. My specific focus is I'm working with businesses. I'm trying to help businesses with relocations, expansions, or lease renewals that operate in industrial properties. Majority of my focus has been in the northern suburbs of the Twin Cities. But again, I have connections all over the Twin Cities, so it kind of helps. So specifically, working with businesses with relocations, renewals, that's kind of my drive. I get several clients doing that. I do have one thing that kind of helps me. Since I've done all of these transactions in the past between landlord, buyer, seller, I have a better understanding, if I didn't do those, of how the entire project looks, or why, let's say, a landlord is looking at something through a landlord lens versus a business, like a tenant, through their lens. So I can educate and piece that and make that transaction probably smoother than if I never operated in that realm ever.
For sure.
Again, the shorter time frame that is, probably the better. And then kind of the other thing is, if you're the specialist, people call you. If you're a generalist, you usually have to reach out to them.
Right, for sure.
That's kind of something I learned in CCIM. Okay. Familiar with CCIM? So it's a program for commercial real estate agents that are interested in investment properties. It is done, at least at the moment, at St. Thomas University through CCIM. And there's multiple courses that you take, and you have to pass a final exam. I'm hoping to take that next year. I got my final class in 3 weeks.
Oh, look at that.
So, I've been trying to crush that one.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
I love it. It's very eye-opening because it's not necessarily something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. But it gives you more tools for you to help your clients, whether they're an investor or not, if they're an owner user of something as well. So looking at getting that designation, it's a very powerful one.
That's awesome. Yeah. So. Yeah. Like, not only do you have to focus on of course expanding your business, but expanding the tools in your toolbox to help your current clients, or depending on where your next move is and all that kind of stuff. So just how you said that you should, of course, focus on what you're focusing on, but plan your next steps and whatnot. What are your next steps? Are you going to use this designation to kind of continue going down a certain path and all that kind of stuff? What's on the horizon?
Yep. So with let's say with a designation, I'm looking at educational opportunities, again, to be a better fit and talk more knowledgeably when I'm putting a project together, or whichever party I'm interacting with at the moment. That's my goal of increasing my education. It's formal. You get a designation with this. Granted, you have to pass the test.
Of course.
It's better if you do versus just taking the classes and not taking the test. But it puts you in a better spot than somebody that never went through that. The other benefit is at Obsidian Group, we have a lot of individuals that focus on different things, and we get to bounce ideas back and forth, and we're a tightly knit group. So it definitely helps talking with somebody that does a lot of like tenant representation, or somebody that does buying and selling, because it gives you a better understanding versus just kind of holistically looking at the picture versus just staying at one thing. It's like, no, it should be done this way. But there's other more creative ways, and actually can spur your imagination and ways to put a project in a more creative manner together.
For sure, yeah. Or there's maybe just a different angle that you didn't, like one person didn't consider that could make or break the client's experience on that, or just add another layer of value,
Absolutely.
I could only imagine. I don't know much about commercial real estate, especially in like the industrial kind of space and tenant reps, but I'm sure there's something that could happen, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. All the time.
For sure.
That's kind of in a nutshell what I try to focus on. One side project I will mention. it does kind of split my focus a little bit, but it's fantastic from the aspect of learning something unique, and probably providing something to the market that a lot of brokers don't interact on, and which is development work. I do site selection for a developer that's out of state, but they develop within Minnesota. That's kind of one little project that doesn't take up too much time, but there's a dedicated hours that I put towards that project.
Right.
And those lead times can be very long. So like residential to commercial is an example. Those projects, the first project that I put together for this developer was in last August. We closed about a month and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
So it took a good year for the closing.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, but you learn a lot during that type of process, and it's not like you're looking only at a building. Majority of the time, let's say you're looking at either whatever, a home and an industrial property. This is you're looking at land. You're trying to buy land, and it teaches you a few valuable skills. One is the kind of negotiating factor and interaction factor with sellers. Actually, let me say it this way, potential sellers, because these properties, this land, majority of the time is not on the market. You're trying to ask somebody to say, hey, will you sell this to me? And they had no plans of selling. So that it's
so
immediately
that obstacle.
That obstacle happens before you even start.
Exactly.
And then the other thing that's very unique, probably less so unique to commercial, is the challenges and issues that you run with working with cities. Different cities have different ordinances, regulations.
Or development plans.
Development plans.
Right, we didn't really want to zone it this way because we didn't see this.
Exactly. And those could be real fun. And speaking of CCIM, just kind of alluding back, we ended up working on a project there within class where we were separated in two groups, a developer and the city. And I actually I intentionally participated on the city's end to see how they feel instead of the developer, because I'm always on the developer side. Yeah. So it was a very unique interaction, which gave me a very good perspective where you usually don't think about when you're on one side of the fence. You usually don't think about the other. But
that's super valuable.
It's very valuable.
So now you know how they work and how they talk, and you can be like, hey, I understand that this might come up issue. Here's how we're planning to deal with it. And then they're like,
exactly. The more proactive you can be on working with either the city or a seller, I think the higher chances of it being a success. Or the project, ahead of time, maybe you put an hour or two into it, it's not going to go anywhere. And you, instead of finding out 3 months down the road, now, which is
when contracts are starting to get in place and all this kind of stuff, and money's
it's like, wait, we didn't agree to this.
Exactly.
Exactly. Sure. So I felt it'd be worth noting as well.
Of course, So, what are maybe some top things that you've learned, maybe either working with the city or working with a developer that you didn't really expect before?
The one thing that tends to come up, and it's a government regulation, is whenever you have a piece of property you're looking at, even if there's access to that property, it might have been used or built at a time that it was allowed or granted, and no longer it's allowed or granted. That can go. The city would be involved in that, MnDOT would be involved in that, the county could be involved in that. But what you learn from that is there's a whole range of issues they can run into when doing, let's say specifically site selection, that you try to knock them out and talk with the right individuals way ahead of time before even maybe potentially approaching the owner or maybe at the same time.
Interesting.
Just because you want to be proactive. It's in commercial real estate in general. I've worked with unique users, and maybe per se they're not necessarily unique. Let's say as an example, like a CrossFit gym. CrossFit gyms, they are typical users of maybe industrial or retail space. On the industrial side, they want higher ceilings, more open area. You can do that on retail as well, but there's a massive cost difference actually in the space that you rent. But those types of users aren't necessarily in zoning or ordinance codes. And right now there's a lot of these gyms or let's say endurance training businesses.
Just sprouting up.
Yep, correct. And the cities don't necessarily know how to handle that, or did they want it, or do they not? So you have to present the business, when you're working with a business, present them in the best light and how they're helping the community, just leveraging that. At the same time, understanding and potentially even meeting with city officials, the planning department, the zoning department, to see if you can structure deals ahead of time, then come up with these, try to cross the issues when they arise, again, months down the road.
Right, for sure.
So with those types of users, you want to stay proactive and finding out if their use is permitted.
Well in advance.
Well in advance. And there are brokers as well that could be the first question that they ask. Let's say I'm representing a business. Let's say it's a CrossFit gym. And they're interested in this space. We found them 3 properties. My first call would be actually to the city to verify if that business can even operate there. Because if it can't, I don't want to waste a broker's time.
Right.
And I learned pretty quickly, but the first few calls that I made, I'd call the broker and say, hey, I got this use. Is the landlord okay with this type of use? They're like, did you talk with the city? And I was like, I did not. I was like, talk with the city, call me back. So I started doing that as well, and it's actually it's actually the right strategy to move forward, because there's no point in going to step B if step A isn't complete.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea there. You'll run into auto use shops as well. Again, representing a business, they're interested in this industrial property. The industrial property owner said, oh, yeah, maybe we can work with you. The space is great. It works. The parking issues are okay. Yeah. But will the city allow that type of use there? Again, that's something to be proactive on. Sometimes you're I ran through 60, 70 properties before I hit one that actually would work.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't know the numbers were so low so high on.
It depends. So as an example, if you're an office user and you're looking at an office property that has a big parking lot, pretty high chances of it going through.
Yeah.
When you're starting to use these creative uses, that's a little harder. Daycares is another example, because daycares typically they'll want maybe potentially, again, indoor space or larger space inside the building for like maybe a play area or something. Typically, they're not done in offices. You can do them in retail buildings, maybe like an end cap. I don't know if you've seen some of those, like New Horizons or something.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe an end cap unit or something. That is, again, you're dealing with zoning first. Industrial buildings. We're actually working with a group as well. We identified an industrial building for a daycare, and you're like, oh, that's weird. I don't want my kid to be in an industrial area.
Place,
but here's the thing. It's kitty corner. This industrial building is on a corner. It's kitty corner to a massive park, kitty across the street from an apartment building, and across the street from a big parking lot. So parents can park. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And all the businesses around that area, they are being converted from more industrial to light industrial to retail. So you'll have like an ice cream shop or something along the lines of, I don't know, maybe a little Subway store or something like that.
Yeah.
So knowing where the city's trying to take it is also important. So the call to the city can go something like, hey, we're looking at, we have this use, this is the business that we're working with, we'd love your city, we'd like to be in, we actually identified a property. Can you tell me a little bit about 2 things? Will this use work in this building? And then 2, how is the area developing? Which direction is it taking? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it converting? Are there any planned developments in the area? As an example, that parking lot, is it going to stay parking lot? Or is somebody going to try to put a building on it?
For sure.
These are all important questions, and to knock them out ahead of time, I think it's more critical. It is upfront effort, but then why find out 3 months later if it's not going to go?
Just waste a lot of time.
Correct.
No, I think that you bring up super good points there. Not only from like a time wasting perspective, but just like to mitigate wasting your time, right? And with the city and whatnot. But also just providing value to your client. It's awesome that you guys have like the really good high standards where you're already like the owner this is already like in the interest of the owner to do as well. So like you're getting everything kind of your ducks in a row and then just going away. So,
exactly. And I can touch on one other thing that's, I think, super important, especially, I think it's important for anybody, and it's preached by a lot of the veteran brokers as well as reaching out to businesses and owners, or I guess whatever demographic you're working with, if they're landlords or buyers or sellers, but making those calls each day and setting aside time for prospecting and connecting with people. So at Obsidian Group, we strive for doing 50 calls a day.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's like kind of a motto. I don't know if we have any other mottos above that one, but like
just 50 calls a day,
50. Yeah, but just 50. The thing is, you don't want to blindly call individuals either. You want to make sure you're providing some sort of value. But as an example, working with a business that's interested in leasing space. So as an example, I'm representing a business that's trying to lease space. There's 15, 20 properties in their area that are on the market that could work. Run through all of them, verify every single one of them has an issue. What do you do? The best thing to do is grab a list or drive around and call everybody in that area and say, hey, I have an opportunity for you. Because maybe and the challenge with commercial real estate in terms of platforms, we have 4 of them. On residential, you just have MLS, and they kind of have a monopoly on that.
Right,
but
exactly.
You have to check multiple sites. Some people don't post. Some people post, or they put their criteria. I've ran into this other funny issue where I knew there was an industrial property that was 16,000 square feet in one of the suburbs, and I could not find it. I could not find it. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I realized I kept backing up my specific search criteria. And I backed it up to nothing. I just cleared everything. So, and I looked at it, and it's there. And the problem that I found out was whoever posted it, they actually did not put any criteria in.
Oh, so if you search.
So if you search industrial, it takes it out. If you search anything, it takes it out. It was by an owner user. So just for any owners out there, just make sure that you're putting the right criteria, because you might completely miss the property. So.
Right, and then there goes your marketing efforts.
Correct. So that's one important point.
Right, for sure. Make sure you're doing your job, people. You want to sell the building? I don't know if you actually want to. Right,
well, but that's where brokers can come in. They will see these things ahead of time, and they'll make sure that, let's say we're specifically working on marketing something, we're making sure that it's the best information out there. And I've ran this into multiple times. We're looking at freezer and cooler space once, and you'd put it in, and there'd be like 3 properties available around the Twin Cities. And I'm like, I know there's other ones. Like I know, like, because I've met the owners, I've seen the properties. But where are they? And again, they weren't. They were one step before that. They put industrial, but they didn't put freezer. So you search freezer, it takes there. Everything out. So I don't know, just little nuances like that. But
it's amazing how much value a broker or someone formally representing you that as a professional that does this all day could be helpful.
Exactly.
And you'd think this is kind of like the hijinks that I feel like happens with residential property more so, because they're just like, oh, I just want to sell my house and whatnot. They're not really privy to like business standards of practices and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually pretty funny to see that it happens even in commercial when they're supposed to be business.
We're all people.
We're all people, exactly. No matter what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
So, that's awesome. So I know you had said, maybe kind of going back, you were starting out as an engineer and So what kind of initially got you involved in real estate? Like you had an interest in the investing portion, I know, because
Correct.
Like a couple of years ago when I first met you, we were kind of like just talking about like bigger pockets and like investing in property and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So how did you kind of get into that?
Yep. I think it's actually started very many years ago. And reflecting back on that, there's certain pieces that I'm like, okay, this is very interesting, this interaction that I had, or this discussion that I had, or this person that I met. It tied into a passion of mine that was continual in terms of investing in something. I just really like that between books and articles, people that I met. It was just intriguing. I moved here from a little country called Moldova in Eastern Europe, and moving to the United States, I didn't know any English at all.
How long ago was that?
About 2 decades ago.
Wow.
So, 20 years ago about. And when I moved here, I didn't know any English. But to know numbers, you don't need to translate them, at least as far as I know, at least from Europe to the United States. So I got really good at math, chemistry, just physics just made sense to me. So I ended up going in that direction. That's what I studied. That's what I went to college for. Very intrigued by that. Always have and probably will be. But to kind of superimpose that, those types of concepts can also be applied to analytics, to statistics, to finances, to investing. And I always thought that was a very practical arm where I could easily connect with anybody that I'm talking about. It's more challenging to talk about either chemical or physical concepts with a good portion of the individuals where you'd be at a party like, hey, how's your job going? Yeah, I'm working on this and this, and like 3 sentences in, it's like, that's not something I'm
working on a petrochemical compound,
like we worked with reactors, a lot of chemical processing. And but one thing that was really easy, everybody, at least who wanted to, would be able to talk about financials and investments. And that's something that, again, I think it was implanted many, many years ago, something I was always interested in. And I thought this was actually a good opportunity when I was transitioning between the engineering role into the financial and investment role. It was a good time to do it, and at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to better round myself, to learn these other concepts that I knew I always wanted to do. I was always intrigued, as an example, by an MBA to learn business concepts. I've actually taken many years outside of work, when I worked at the engineering firm, to study and go to classes for business and mathematics and accounting and a little bit of legal, just because it gives, I believe
more
it
context.
gives you, it's something, it's another topic that you can kind of talk about and kind of piece together, and you can not only help yourself, you can help other people, or at least point them in the right direction. Again, none of what I say is they're hard facts, because it's information not based on like 10 or 20 years of studying, but it's general information that you can actually use to get pointed in the right direction.
For sure, yeah.
So, I ended up transitioning with the idea in mind that I can grow in these other. They're both hard and soft skills. The hard skills are the math. They are the investor. You got to understand that, and how that dynamic works with the soft skills. And the soft skills are the sales and the marketing and the people skills. So you're helping a business. You're talking with like the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, like in a city, to try to put a project together. That's not something that you'll necessarily pick up in let's say an engineering field, or just if you're an analyst. It gives you a more holistic view and picture. And I believe, at least for me, it has helped me to talk with individuals or companies that are interested in moving in a certain direction, and I can give them a different perspective that I don't think a lot of people can, just because of my background.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
yeah, and that's just kind of a thing too. Like you're a lot of times you're piecing things together that as you're going through life, you're like, I have kind of interest in this, but you don't really see where they might apply later on, right?
Yep.
So just like anything else, like right now you're doing like a lot of tenant representation and whatnot, but like the development experience, of course, definitely impacts how that's going to happen, right?
Yep.
And then your prior classes with kind of looking at legal or accounting and all that kind of stuff. Now everything's kind of dovetailing, and you can speak with business owners on even if it's like just kind of like a short conversation or kind of more casual.
Exactly.
You're able to keep up with everybody and just like provide that value, or maybe a little bit of something here where it could be a unique angle for them to kind of further explore, and then you just gave them more value by giving them that idea, or
Absolutely.
So definitely love it, man.
Yep. We also connect with a lot of businesses. So if one is struggling or one is seeking something, we can leverage those connections, of course, with their permission. But to put other businesses in touch with one another. So that's something that's very unique as well, between so many different projects that I've worked on in the past. It's just another extra tie there. So
for sure. All right. So in the future, though, you're looking at. I know that you initially got interested in investing financials and everything else.
Yeah.
How are your investment efforts going right now? Is that kind of like on the horizon, or what are you looking towards?
Yes, we actually had two projects that I was excited about putting together. They're both still in the works, but I'll take it a step back here. The types of investments that I look for, and Obsidian Group in general looks for, are opportunities to force the appreciation. So that whether you're improving the building or you're placing a business in a property, those are the opportunities. They're not the types of opportunities that are stable properties. Let's say they're fully leased. They're just giving you, a 7% return.
They're just like a cash cow.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, that's not necessarily what I ever was intrigued with, and that's not what our focus is at Obsidian Group, and that's the reason I'm at this company. But on the value add, it is the ability to create a better investment in the future from your efforts now. And there's two opportunities that came up, but because of that, they just take a very long time, and there's a very high probability of them falling apart. So specifically, I have not done anything that is actionable or something that I can, not necessarily actionable, nothing that has closed, but there's two projects that I'm pursuing, hoping to be part of them if at some point they do come together.
For sure.
But both of them have a lot of hair on them.
Yeah, so, and this, you're more or less looking at commercial arbitrage as like the investment and whatnot, right? Value adding, which, it seems like you try to add value wherever you are, whether it's client relationships, working on transactions, investing,
I think it's a good way of going about it in general. So.
Yeah, no doubt. But even before, you just said that there was a client that you had worked with for a year before something closed, right? So, and like that could have been, I don't know if it's hairier, but like hairy projects definitely. If that is like a standard one, then how long will it? I know commercials like very long time horizons, but at the same time, numbers are bigger at this.
Yes,
the length is bigger than the numbers.
Exactly.
Cash flow.
Exactly.
Value, all that kind of stuff.
And they could be. You just have to evaluate the property correctly, and we want to make sure we're buying these investments correctly, because you can win a lot, but you can also lose
really
considerably.
Yeah.
So we do a pretty heavy vetting of properties when we look at them.
So you're looking at investments for commercial arbitrage, helping out your clients, doing leasing, all that kind of stuff. If people kind of dug your story or like really what you're up to and where you're going, how could they reach out to you?
Sure. VSM podcast. If you send something in the footnotes, I'll definitely see that.
Yeah.
I listen to your podcast as well.
Thank you, sir.
I am, of course, on LinkedIn. That's a good way of reaching out to me. I'm on Facebook as well, Andrei Bortnov.
How do you spell that? It's a little different.
Yeah.
Than
Oh, yeah, it is.
right?
It is.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So it's Andrei. I got that I at the end that throws people off.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Yep. But those are kind of the main two platforms. If you go to obsidiangroup.com, you'll have all my contact information there. Yeah, I'm usually kind of all over social media. At least I try to be. Between other people, being on at events, on podcasts, and just kind of do my own thing as well.
That's awesome, man.
So.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to share before we head out?
I think we actually dove pretty deep on a few
yeah, it was good.
Topics there.
We'll definitely have you on again,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Catch you next time.